Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see your pictures on my Hollywood Square screen. So we'll see how we can move you around. Shall we get started with the meeting? I call this meeting to order. This is the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee of the City Council. All committee members are present today via Zoom. This is a remote or online meeting where all participants will be on a video or audio conference. We appreciate your patience as meetings are conducted in this way. Members of the public, city staff, and the media have the ability to view this meeting live through YouTube and Zoom webinar. The live stream can be accessed from most smartphones, tablets, or computers. For those watching on the live stream, thank you for joining us. Written comments were received for today's meeting and were provided to members of the committee. Members of the public have the opportunity to address the committee if they signed up for live comment per the rules published on the agenda and on our website Friday. Although staff has informed me that no individuals have signed up to address the committee today. So let's now go to agenda item A083. Councilor Benton, this is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 083 is amending Chapter 9, Article 5, Part 5 of the revised ordinances of Albuquerque, the Albuquerque Clean Indoor Air Ordinance is what is known as colloquially, regarding public consumption of cannabis following the enactment of the Mexico Cannabis Regulation Act, NMSA 78, Section 26-2C-1 et sec. I move a do pass.
Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
Council Feeblecorn has a second.
Thank you,
Okay.
Councilor. We do have an amendment to discuss, but just for beginning, I would like to hear from our staff just to explain what this is about. Of course, it has to do with the state passage of legalized cannabis and getting aligned with that. We just considered some consideration to it too last night before the Public Safety Committee, and that were generated from the similar issues. So I'll turn it over to, it looks like Julia's ready to get up to the plate.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. Good evening, Julia. Ms. Kuladon, sorry to call you Julia. If
That's
you would
okay.
Give us a little additional information, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, councilors. As Councilor Benton said, this bill updates the Albuquerque Clean Indoor Air Ordinance to comply with some recent changes to cannabis law at the state level. The state did a couple of things. It enacted the Cannabis Regulation Act, and then pursuant to that, the state's Clean Indoor Air Act, which regulates secondhand tobacco smoke, was updated to include some restrictions on cannabis smoke. Albuquerque's Clean Indoor Air Ordinance is intended to model and expand on the state's act. However, in its current form, our ordinance only regulates tobacco smoke. So these proposed amendments contained in 083 would expand the city's ordinance to include the regulation of cannabis smoke, and it would also define the limited areas in which public consumption of cannabis is permitted.
Thank you. Councilors, are there any questions? If not, we do have an amendment, a floor amendment. Floor amendment number 1 to 02183, and I will read that if you'd like. It is on page 6, line 21, insert a new subsection, D. It is unlawful for a person to consume cannabis in any public place except in a cannabis consumption area. This subsection D shall not be construed to restrict the ability of a person to prohibit conduct otherwise allowed in the Cannabis Regulation Act on the person's privately owned property. And on page 6, line 23, insert cannabis shall not be consumed openly in public within the city of Albuquerque. And then it reads the smoking prohibited. That's it. Sorry, I was going to read the whole thing to you. So I would move approval of this amendment. Counselors, do I have a second? Counselor Benton gave us a second. Therefore, if we would call the roll, please.
Absolutely. Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Fibucorn,
No.
Counselor Pena, excused. Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
and that passes on a 3-1 vote.
Thank you, counselors. We appreciate that. Next is Counselor Benton. Do you have another amendment?
I do. And let me see if I can get to it here. Not a power user of my iPad.
Counselor Benton, it is on the screen if that's easier for you.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this would be amendment number 2 to 2183 on page 3, line 23. Strike and insert as follows: cannabis consumption area. This is changed to read an area of cannabis established of a cannabis establishment licensed under the Cannabis Regulation Act. Chapter 26, Article 2C, NMSA 1978, designated for smoking or other use of cannabis. On page 6, line 1, insert as follows: smoking means inhaling, exhaling, burning, carrying, or holding any lighted, heated, or otherwise volatilized tobacco or cannabis product, including all types of cigarettes, cigars, and pipes, and adding e-cigarettes, and vaporizers, and any other lighted tobacco or cannabis product. And then on page 6, line 21, a new subsection D is added. This is 9554, smoking prohibited. D would add the language: it is unlawful for a person to smoke in a cannabis consumption area whenever a law enforcement officer, other first responder, or employee or agent of the city of Albuquerque, Bernalillo, the state or tribal government or public utility is conducting official business at the cannabis consumption area. And then on page 4, line 9, insert a new subsection as follows: 55A, posted smoke-free and smoke-permitted areas. A, to advise persons of the existence of smoke-free areas or smoking, is that a typo? Or smoking dash prohibited, permitted areas, signs shall be posted as follows. 3, for each cannabis consumption area, cannabis smoking permitted sign shall be posted where it is in a clear, conspicuous, and easily legible at each public entrance. And these definitions, I'll leave it to staff to explain why they're important.
Counselors, are there any questions of staff?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Counselor Fibucorn.
Yes, so my question is on number 3, when we say it's unlawful for someone to smoke cannabis when an agent of the government is present, that seems very concerning to me. They're in a place where they're legally allowed to consume cannabis, and someone walks in. I understand if it's a police officer, they would be in a uniform, but if they're a utility worker or a city employee, they will not be in uniform. And how will they know that they are supposed to not be smoking cannabis in a legally allowable space?
Madam Chair, Council Fibucorn, so this portion of the amendment is focused on these government employees who are present and carrying out their official duties. So Like a good example would be if an APD officer was called out to a cannabis consumption area to deal with some sort of an emergency there, smoking would have to stop, whether it's the officer informing people to stop, or maybe the establishment itself informing people that smoking needs to stop at that point is not dealt with in this particular ordinance. But the rationale being that we don't want these individuals to be exposed to secondhand smoke, possibly become intoxicated on the job. And some of these employees may also be subject to drug testing as part of their conditions of employment. So it's narrowly focused on when these individuals are there carrying out their official job duties.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have concerns that when we just say it's unlawful for smoking to be happening when those folks are in the building, that's concerning. If it said something like, after a period of warning or something, but just to have it say it's unlawful is very concerning to me, Madam Chair.
Is
Madam Chair.
Councilor Benton?
That's a really good point. Couldn't this just read, upon notice from the public employee, the employee who's there working, upon notice that smoking shall cease until the employee has vacated the property, has left the smoking area. Would that be a problem, Julia? That would be an amendment to this amendment.
Madam Chair, Councilor Benton, I do think that we can insert that edit into your amendment. Yes.
So if there are no objections to the committee, I would make that amendment to my own amendment. I don't believe that requires a vote, or does it, Julia?
Does that require a vote? Let's do it anyway. So there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second for a floor amendment.
And I see, Councilor Jones, I see Councilor Sanchez has his hand raised. Maybe before we vote, we should hear from him.
Got it. Councilor Sanchez, are you going to tack onto this, or do you have another, do you want to talk about something else?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to quickly just state that me being a law enforcement officer and having to walk into a situation like this, you never know if it's an emergency situation, no matter what the situation might be. I honestly believe that the way the ordinance is written right now is the correct way for a law enforcement officer or anybody that walks in. I mean, even if it's a city worker that walks in and he has to handle some sort of duty within that environment, that I still believe that the smoking should cease immediately. And I think that it's important that we maintain that there is really no announcement that the minute the officer or that official capacity person walks in, that it should cease, because the last thing you want to do is have a firefighter, a police officer administering some sort of emergency service to that individual and then become intoxicated. So it's really important that we make sure that those people are kept safe immediately.
Thank you, Councilor Sanchez. Councilor Benton, do you have a comment on that?
I would just, also defer to Councilor Feeblecorn, who brought this up, but I think the intention would just be to make it clear that just because a person walked into the room, now everyone else is out of compliance, without some sort of statement that they need, just announcement by the person that I'm here on public official business, that you need to stop smoking until I can get out of this area, type thing. But I'll defer to Councilor Feeblecorn on that.
Thank you, Councilor Feeblecorn.
Madam Chair, yes, Councilor Benton's correct. I'm just concerned that, I'm in a legally allowed place and I'm smoking cannabis with my back to the door, and a representative of any of these organizations, and there's a lot of lists here, comes in, and all of a sudden I am doing something unlawful. And I wouldn't even know that I was doing something unlawful. And I don't think that's what the intent is. And I think that just adding in something that says, when you walk in the door, you have to notify the room that they need to stop smoking, and so that they have an opportunity to not be breaking the law, seems like a relatively simple fix to this problem.
Councilors, are there any other comments? Councilor Benton?
Sorry, just in response to that, what I would be asking our staff to wordsmith here would be some sort of, you could say, my suggested language was upon notice. That notice could be from the bartender, that could be from anyone. It could be from a member of the public that say, hey, an officers are here on some kind of business, we need to stop smoking. But upon notice, whether from that public employee or from the operator of the business, and I don't think we would necessarily need to spell it out who would be, but upon notice, some sort of notice being given, if I've got my back to the situation and there's no commotion or anything going on for me to know otherwise, that I would need to receive some sort of verbal notice that I need to cease consumption.
Thank you. Councilor Sanchez, councilors, any other comments? At this point, it looks like we have,
I'm sorry.
yes, Councilor Sanchez?
Being in that situation, it's really difficult.Maybe we could do something a little different in terms of along the lines that if I understand what Councilor Feeblecorn means, but I just know that when you're in a situation and you're going in to help somebody and you're walking into a situation and you may not have a chance to say anything, you may not have a chance to announce yourself. And is there any way that we could maybe put something, maybe a posting at the door, something that says if there's an emergency situation, that the use has to cease immediately? The last thing you want to have happen is you want to have, there's already going to be a ton of secondhand smoke in there. And my feeling is that the minute you walk in and you're in a designated cannabis smoking area, and I've never smoked weed before, so I don't know, but it's my understanding that when you walk in the door, that you can become intoxicated immediately, and that concerns me as well, because I'm in a designated smoking area, and yet we're going to need to be possibly sending people from law enforcement or AFR who actually have to test, and not only have to test, but can become intoxicated immediately walking through the doors. So it just makes it really, really difficult for the law enforcement community and the public safety community to even enter a place without even being exposed. And so I still have a concern with that. So I would think maybe if there was be a place that you can maybe post it at the door, that if someone in their official capacity enters, that it maybe be the responsibility of the owner to make sure that everything, because more than likely the owner or somebody that is running that business at the time made the phone call to get the emergency services there. So maybe we can incorporate that so that somehow they can be set up so that the law enforcement person or the person in the official capacity doesn't have to make that call, and they're actually still as safe as they can be.
Thank you. Councilor Benton, and then Councilor Feeblecorn again.
I wonder if Ms. Culloden or Mr. Melendres could craft something short and sweet along the lines of what what Councilor Sanchez just said. I like the idea of the proprietor, basically, handling the situation as far as the notification. But I'd like to hear from Councilor Fiebelkorn.
Thank you. And Councilor Fiebelkorn, and then I have one comment. Councilor Fiebelkorn?
Madam Chair, I do agree with Councilor Benton. I think the onus should be on the proprietor here rather than having individuals who may not be looking at the door, understanding what's happening. If we were to write it where it was the proprietor of the establishment shall stop smoking in this situation, then it's not that these individuals that just may not be paying attention, may not know what's happening behind them or on the other side of the room, wouldn't be doing an unlawful act. It puts the onus on the owner of the building or on the owner of the business.
Thank you. Thank you. And if I may, Councilor Sanchez, before I ask you to speak, I'd like to add one thing that has been suggested, and that is an addition that says, upon notice of the arrival of the public employee, smoking shall cease until the employee leaves the area, which is pretty simple and straight. And of course, one other thing that we need to discuss is the fact that in the legislation for this, an air filtration system is required. So hopefully the amount of smoke floating around will be mitigated as much as possible. So just a couple ideas to put out there, and we'll talk about. Councilor Fiebelkorn, did you have another comment?
No, I would.
Councilor Sanchez.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, I really liked what you said, and I think we're really coming to a consensus here. I like the fact that if you're going to be making a phone call or someone's going to be making a phone call to public services, then at that point, it makes it really important that they can shut down everything at that point. The smoking can stop. They'll be expecting the emergency personnel to enter, and at that point, it'll be good. I really like the fact that there's venting so that there's nobody that wants to, if you're in there and you're walking through as a public employee and going to help out, then at that point you probably run a less chance of becoming intoxicated and can render better care at that point. So I like those comments. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, so this is an amendment to my amendment. Do we conclude that we need to vote on this amendment to the amendment?
Yes, we do. And I'm just discussing with Petra if we need to do this now. Vote on it now or later, Petra?
We should vote on it now, because then when you vote on this amendment, you'll be voting on the amendment as amended.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to put this in the record upon notice of the arrival. So this will be an amendment to the amendment, what we read before. Do I have a second on that?
Second that.
There's a motion and a second. Councilors, any other discussion? Councilor Pena. Councilor Pena, did you want to speak, or just letting us know that you're available now?
No, Madam Chair, just if you could read the amendment again, because I know there was some discussion about language change, and I just want to make sure that I understand the amendment before I vote on it.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. It says, it's an addition. It says, upon notice of the arrival of the public employee, smoking shall cease until the employee leaves the area.
Madam
Perfect,
Chair,
thank you.
Madam Chair, I think I just want to make sure that if I may kind of interject, I want to make sure that everybody's clear on what's going on. I think that what you read is the amendment, Councilor Benton's amendment as it was presented to the committee. And I believe that the amendment that was, I think, articulated by Councilor Fiebelkorn and accepted by Councilor Benton would say that upon, I don't remember the exact language. Maybe Julian, you could put it up on the screen, because I think we're missing some verbiage there that we need to be clear on before you all vote.
Thank you, Mr. Melendez. Julian is searching. There he is.
We want to scroll up a little bit, Julian.
Page 1.
That's it.
So I think what was proposed is that it would say is unlawful for any person to smoke in a cannabis consumption area. I think it should say that the proprietor of a cannabis consumption area shall cause smoking to cease whenever a law enforcement or other first responder or employee or agent of the city, et cetera, is conducting official business. I believe that was what I heard being proposed. And so that's the amendment to the amendment that I think was articulated.
I think if I may, Mr. Melenders, the term proprietor, I'm not sure. I think it should be a little more broad than that. Is the proprietor not normally considered the owner of the business?
Yeah, good question. So the licensee, perhaps the owner or manager, just want to make sure that by saying owner, we're not leaving out somebody's.
About the employee in charge of the facility at the time.
Madam Chair, if I may, and I
Councilor
see,
Benton, yes.
I see Councilor Pena has another question, but just so that we're clear on this. I think proprietor is correct because a proprietor is not a person. It's the operator and their employees. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's the right term.
Okay, sounds good to me. Councilor Pena.
Yes, Madam Chair, and the other clarification is that we took out the word unlawful because I agree with Councilor Peoplecorn.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. Are we comfortable with that? And can we read that back the way we think are there any other comments before we vote on this amendment to the amendment? Okay, do we need to read that back, Petra, to be sure?
Yes.
Okay.
I think
Yeah, I think we were making several changes in there. So I'm going to ask Ms. Morris to read back what is being proposed the amendment that we're proposing to use to amend. Ms. Morris?
Madam Chair, councillors, if I caught everything correctly, section D would start with the proprietor shall cause the smoking to cease whenever a law enforcement officer, other first responder or employee or agent of the city of Albuquerque, Bernalillo County, state of New Mexico, tribal government or public utility is conducting official business at the cannabis consumption area.
Are we comfortable with that, councilors?
Yes,
All right.
and just again, to clarify, we still got to vote on the amendment after we vote on this.
Yes, that is correct. So we are now voting on the amendment that was just read, the amendment to the amendment that was just read. We have a motion in a second. Councilor Benton?
Urge your support, I guess,
Thank you.
unless you're calling for my vote.
Not yet. We'll call the roll. Councilor Benton?
Councillor Benton,
Yes.
Council Peoplecorn,
Yes.
Councillor Pena,
Yes.
Councillor Sanchez,
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
That passes on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you, councilors. We're now moving to amendment number 2. And I believe this is,
That's
just that
Chair.
one amendment. We're finished with that amendment. Thank you.
Right. So now
we're,
unless there are any other questions about this overall amendment,
thank you.
thank you.
Councilor Benton, would you like to say something to close?
No.
Okay. This is a vote. Yes. This is a vote on the amendment to the amendment. That's the amended amendment. Okay. Call the roll, please.
Councillor Benton,
Yes.
Council Peoplecorn,
Yes.
Councillor Pena,
Yes.
Councillor Sanchez,
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
That passes on a 5-0 vote.
All right. That was amendment number 2. We are now ready to vote on the final bill, councilors, unless there's any other comment, amendments. And I will need a vote on the final bill as amended. So if you will, I think I need a second on that probably.
I got it.
It's already seconded. Okay.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Picklecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Jones.
Yes.
That passes on a 5-0 vote.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. That was more than a little confusing in my mind. Next on the agenda is B07, adopting a zoning map amendment for approximately 14.1 acre site located on the southern side of the Harper Road Northeast between Wyoming Boulevard and Ventura Street from MX 11 to R1C in order to facilitate future development. I would like to move a do pass, and then perhaps we could get a little more explanation from staff on that one.
Madam Chair, I believe you have some procedures in your script that need to be read for this particular agenda item.
Got it. Do I get to take a second on that first? May I hear a second on that? Thank you, Counselor Benton. So here we go. 22.7 is a quasi judicial request, which requires special procedures to allow the applicant, staff, and the public the opportunity to speak. Time limits for presenters are as follows. Introduction by staff, 5 minutes. Presentation by applicant, 10 minutes. Public comment, 2 minutes per person. Rebuttal by applicant, 2 minutes. Comments by planning department, if any. City staff and the applicant must be sworn in. If you will be speaking to this item as a staff member or applicant, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm under penalty of perjury that your testimony today will be true?
I do.
Thank you. There were 2 who raised their hands and answered to that. Ms. Schultz, would you please begin your introduction?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This request is for a zone map amendment for an approximately 14.1 acre site. I am going to share my screen so that I can just pull up a quick aerial map of the area that we're talking about. This is near what's known as the Albuquerque Academy. This is just north of the Albuquerque Academy. The parcel is not owned by the Academy, unrelated, but in proximity. I've highlighted the parcel here in blue. This is the about 14 acre site that is being requested to go from MXL, that is mixed use light intensity, to R1C. The R1 zone is our low density residential zone, and the C is a particular flavor of that R1 designation that indicates the lots will be on the larger side. This request was considered by the Environmental Planning Commission in October. There was very little discussion from the commissioners on the case. Some of the discussion surrounded particular site features or site layouts, but I'd like to remind the council that what you are considering today is a zone map amendment request, and pertinent details to site layouts and site features are not considered as a part of a zone map amendment request. The Integrated Development Ordinance has specific review and decision criteria that the applicant, who is with us today, that's Jackie Fishman with Consensus Planning, had to provide to the Environmental Planning Commission to justify the request to essentially prove that moving from the MXL zone to the R1C zone would meet that criteria found in the Integrated Development Ordinance, and further a preponderance of goals and policies as they are outlined in the comprehensive plan. As I said, the EPC considered this case in October of last year. There was one public commenter at that case who was a representative from the Albuquerque Academy, who voiced some general concerns about grading and drainage of the site in relation to future developments. And the applicant's response to that, which in my opinion was the right response, is those details get sorted out at the site planning stage. And where we are at right now is solely considering, is a zone change from MXL to R1C appropriate? The details about the site would be worked out and approved through a separate process in the future. Ultimately, the Environmental Planning Commission did end up unanimously recommending approval to the City Council for this case, subject to a series of findings related to the justification that the applicant provided to them. Those findings are in the ordinance that the council is considering this evening. There's an amendment related to those findings that Councillor Jones will be moving shortly, and I would be happy to talk about that. But overall, I would say that this was a relatively non-controversial case, which is pretty incredible given the history on this site. Prior to the IDO, the council has heard and dealt with 2 appeals related to previous approvals for this site. Ultimately, those approvals were upheld and that development did not end up moving forward. So the applicant, who is Hoffmantown Church, is coming back to request the zone change from MXL to R1C to promote development in the future of some kind of low density residential development. That does it for my 5-minute intro, and I will pass the baton over to Ms. Fishman to give her presentation on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you. Any comments, Ms. Fishman?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and councilors. Jackie Fishman here from Consensus Planning. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, which is Pulte Group. They are the contract purchaser of the property. Hoffmantown Church is still the owner. And I think Shanna did a good job, but I'll just add a couple more comments to this. I've personally been working on this property since 2008. So I went through entitlement process for 2 different senior living facilities. I still think today that those are fine uses in this location. I worked extensively with Cherry Hills Neighborhood Association on all 3 of the different concepts for this property. As you all know, or several of the councilors know that were on the council at the time, in 2018, there were a couple of appeals by Cherry Hills. They just didn't like senior living in this location. That applicant back then never proceeded with the project for whatever reason. And so the property has been for sale by Hoffmantown Church for a while. It's a very large property that they originally developed. They had a site plan that covered all their acreage, and there has never been a chance in the world for them to develop all this property. So it's really been excess property for 15, 20 years now. Going forward, this would be a single family subdivision, very similar to what's across the street to the north at Cherry Hills. I did talk to the president of the association when we were going through this in September and October through the EPC process. And, they were in support of the zone change. They like the down zone, of course. And like Shanna said, that they had questions about the design of the subdivision, but that doesn't get worked out at the EPC level during zone change. It gets worked out at the DRB level when we go for a major subdivision plat. I think one of the things that Ms. Schultz also mentioned was the concern about grading and drainage from Albuquerque Academy. That really has to do with the South Pino Arroyo, which goes through this property on the south edge. And you can see, well, I'm looking at my screen, but to the south of the subject property is Albuquerque Academy and the Arroyo, but further south is a solar array project that was put in the Arroyo. That's a whole other story of how that got in there and didn't go through the proper procedures. But anyways, that's where the concern has been, is will the development of this site impact the Albuquerque Academy's solar field? We've got fantastic engineers on the team from Bohannon Houston They've studied the site with me again since 2008. So I'm confident that all of those issues will get worked out as we go through the process. I would say with that, I would answer any questions you may have, but I think that gives you the project in a nutshell.
Thank you, Ms. Fishman. Counselors, are there any questions? Are there any other comments from the planning department? Oh, Counselor Benton first.
I do have a couple of questions on this. I would suppose that they would be either for Ms. Fishman or for Ms. Schultz. I guess one for Ms. Fishman is, so this is under contract, in other words, for sale. So it's still the existing zone, and this is the contingency aspect of the transaction. Is that correct?
Yes, Counselor Benton, that's correct.
All right. And then the other question is, under the existing zone MXL, what is the maximum residential dwelling units per acre?
Madam Chair, Counselor Benton, there is no maximum density in the zoning. So you get to your density and the number of units through meeting your parking requirements, meeting your building maximum building height requirements, and so on.
Understood. Yeah, that language is basically. Thank for reminding me that was changed under the IDO to basically a sort of a performance-based density, if you will. But would it be fair to say that under that zone, more dwelling units could be provided on this amount of land than under single-family zoning?
Madam Chair, Counselor Benton, yes, the MXL would probably yield more density than the R1C. The MXL doesn't allow single-family residential development, so we couldn't do that kind of project on the site. MXL is really geared towards multifamily mixed with obviously the neighborhood commercial level development.
And is that commercial component a requirement under MXL? In other words, must you have a mixed use, or can you just do for example, a multifamily residential project on the site?
No, Madam Chair, Counselor Benton, no, mixed use is not required. Somebody could do multifamily exclusively on this site and all MXL or MXM sites.
Okay, thank you. That answers my questions for now.
Thank you, Counselor Benton. Counselor Feeblecorn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question on, in the comprehensive plan, one of the goals deals with complete communities, trying to get infill to provide all the opportunities for living, working, shopping, playing in one spot. And I noticed that in the application, it said that this proposal and this change would somehow help get us to a complete community. I'm not seeing how single family large lots in this spot would get us towards that goal. Can somebody explain that?
Madam Chair, Counselor Feeblecorn, I'd be happy to address that. I was asked the same question at EPC. I think on a micro level, no, this doesn't create a complete community. But if you look at the area around this property, it's got commercial development to the west in a shopping center, west and south. There's the church to the east. There's Cherry Hills Library slightly to the west of here. There is a lot of uses that could be utilized, but I think if you if you start from a vacant site that has stayed vacant since the 80s, and have something that's a feasible development, I think it does further that goal. But maybe not at a literal and micro level sense.
Thank you. Counselors, are there any other questions? Are there any other comments from the planning department? Okay. Counselors, any questions for staff or the administration?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure if this is the right place for this, but my concern with the application is this, and maybe the staff or administration or Ms. Fishman can address it. And this does have to do with the carrying capacity of this land. And granted, an undeveloped site is, in a sense, a wasted site. But I think there's another aspect to what's best for the community in general, and not just the neighbors who were even against fairly low density, as I understand it, senior living project previously, as described by Ms. Fishman. My thinking on this, and somebody dissuade me of this, but if possible, my thinking on this is, yes, it's a nice big piece of land that is zoned for more individuals and families to enjoy it than this low density development would create. I understand why even the findings of the EPC said that this is beneficial, that it does enhance and protect and preserve distinct communities. I don't know how distinct other single family development is, but I recognize that it looks like what's across the street. The question is that really for the benefit of the greater community when we've got expensive infrastructure that serves this site and the street and a lot of capacity, most likely, to support more dwellings there. We've also got private infrastructure in the form of really good shopping in the area. Not far down the road is groceries, multiple groceries, and other retail neighborhood type services that are valuable. That's my question, and that's my question about maybe whoever was at the EPC, whether they discussed that aspect. I know the question of whether mixed use or not, but I didn't see really I didn't get notice, and maybe it could be described as to whether that was discussed at EPC. But EPC pretty much kept repeating, it looks like the existing area protects the identity of the existing area, although this large school campus and so forth doesn't necessarily, and a large church is not like the neighborhoods across the street either. And then the goal 5.2, complete communities. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how the EPC came up with this as a furthering of that goal. I have multiple questions about how this was decided to be appropriate, besides the fact that we know that the neighbors across the street would prefer nothing more than low density residential housing, ownership housing, not unaffordable housing, by the way, just by its definition and location and the product type. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Benton, are there any other comments, councillors? Mr. Moyo, have there been any other comments called in?
Madam Chair, no, we did not have anybody sign up for public comment for 0227.
Thank you. Councillors, have been no other comments. I would like to make one comment, if I may, follow up on all this, and that is, I live very near this property. I'm very familiar with it. And it has been vacant for decades, as you might know, forever. There are a good mix of different kinds of housing and retail. There are apartments nearby. There are townhouses nearby. There are single family, and there's a good deal of commercial. For heaven's sakes, there's a Walmart across the street, basically. But I see no fault with this type of development. I think it will be in my opinion, only as a neighbor, I feel it will be an asset to the community to add a breath of fresh air, a new face to something that has sat there as vacant land for decades. So with that, councilors, are there any other comments? So there's been Councilor Feeblecorn?
Madam Chair, I'll just add a comment that, in this time when we are having a serious shortage of housing and affordable housing, and the move to increase density in the city of Albuquerque so that folks do have access to housing, this seems like a move in the wrong direction to me.
Technical change.
Okay. Okay. I understand we have, thank you, Councilor Feeblecorn. I'm getting advice from here that I've been forgetting things, and which is true. We also have some technical amendments, and I believe that Ms. Schultz is going to discuss that.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to. There is one amendment to this bill related to the findings that the EPC put together in their recommendation of approval to the City Council. You'll see in the ordinance, there are a series, about a dozen or so of findings that justify the request. These were findings developed from the information that the applicant would have provided about why the request met the requirements of the Integrated Development Ordinance, how it furthered city goals and policies. When the Environmental Planning Commission issued their notice of decision, it contained all of these findings. Somehow, from the time of that notice of decision being issued to this ordinance being put together by planning department staff, 2 of those findings got missed. They were not intentionally left out. They should be included as a part of kind of the official record for the case. And so what all this amendment does is put back into place those 2 findings that the Environmental Planning Commission did review and approve, and that erroneously got left out of the legislation, the ordinance, the bill itself. So I don't think I need to read this underlined language here directly to you. I'll just provide the kind of anecdotal information about why we're doing this, and it doesn't change anything about what the EPC did or recommended. And in fact, I would say it just kind of further codifies their decision and how they got to that decision.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. And I believe that I shall just make sure we have it on record. I will move amendment number 1, which we just heard. Councilor Pena, second. A second by Councilor Pena. Councilors, are there any other questions or comments? With that, we'll need a vote. Ms. Montoya, would you take the vote?
Councilor Benton,
No.
Council Feeblecorn,
No.
Councilor Pena,
Yes.
Councilor Sanchez,
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Yes.
That passes on a 3-2 vote.
Thank you, councilors. That one was a little tough to do on the fly here. Would have been nice to have a few more speakers, but it worked. So now we will go back to the bill, and I make a motion on 0227 as amended. There's a second by Councilor Pena. Councilor Sanchez, was that another second or question? Yes. All right. If we would please call the roll.
Councilor Benton,
No.
Council Feeblecorn,
No.
Councilor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
and that passes on a 3-2 vote.
Thank you, counselors. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens there. This could be a beautiful project.
Thank you.
And thank you. We'll now go to agenda item C, R6. Counselor Benton, would you like to introduce this, please?
Sure, Madam Chair, I'm happy to. R6 is establishing city policy for evaluating competing cannabis business registration requests within 600 feet of one another. I move it do pass.
Second.
And we do have some amendment or an amendment. This has to do, I guess we probably Shannon will more articulately or Petra describe this than I would, but you know, we do have this the intention of this 600-foot separation, which I believe is consistent with other similar things of like consuming alcohol and so forth. Or maybe not. Maybe that doesn't have this kind of distance requirement. I would just ask staff to explain it, because I'm already being ineloquent.
Welcome to my world tonight, Counselor Benton. Ms. Schultz, Ms. Morris? Ms. Morris will give us something that hopefully Counselor Benton and I can understand a little better. Ms. Morris?
Madam Chair, councillors, thank you. I'll do a short summary on the bill as well as the amendment. So this bill proposes the city policy for evaluating cannabis applications. When the idea was updated, in 2020, the council added a 600-foot distance separation for cannabis retail uses in order to ensure that we didn't end up with an over-concentration of cannabis retail uses in any one particular part of town. However, this was created a relatively unique situation in that normally when we introduce distance separations in zoning, there's already existing businesses. And with this, except with the exception of existing cannabis medical dispensaries, we don't have any businesses from which to measure from. And so this is the ultimate, to use the phrase, chicken and egg question, which one comes first? And so the bill as originally drafted and on the letter of introduction on February 4th, proposed that the policy evaluating competing businesses would be based on cannabis business registration requests. However, at about the same time, the planning department had put together a process called a cannabis retail location approval, which requires that applicants provide a state license as well as information about either a lease or ownership or a letter of intent for a particular property, and that they certify that they are 300 feet away from a school or daycare or 600 feet away from another cannabis retail business. And so what this amendment does is it updates the bill, which it proposes to have a first come, first serve order for applications to be considered, to reference the cannabis retail location approval. And so the amendment makes 4 changes in order to do that. It updates the title. It adds a whereas clause to explain this, and then adds removes a reference in section 1 of the actions of the bill to strike business registration and replace it with cannabis retail location approval. And then finally adds a clarifying additional action that states the city shall not issue a business registration until such time that the cannabis retail location approval has been approved.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Thank you, Ms. Morris. Are there any questions of that? Councilor Pena?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question, since it is already in part of the rules process, why do we need this resolution? Why is it important to make it a law?
Thank you. Ms. Morris?
Madam Chair, Councilor Pena, yes, this is an excellent question. So The IDO just says that you have to be 600 feet away from another cannabis retail business. But because we don't have, with the exception of the medical dispensers, any cannabis retail businesses on the books yet, because cannabis retail businesses haven't opened yet, the planning department needed a process in order to work out who comes in first, who gets to be that first business, second business in, that the other businesses would be measured 600 feet away from. And so what this bill proposes is that those applications be reviewed via the cannabis retail location approval, and that those applications be reviewed on a first come, first serve basis. So when they come in for their, apply for their CRLA on the planning department website, they get a timestamp. And so let's say business A comes in at 9:01 and business B comes in at 9:02 and business C comes in at 9:03, and they're all in the same street next to each other. Business A that came in at 9:01 would get their approval reviewed and approved prior to considering those next ones. And Madam Chair, Director Varela is, I see, turned on his camera in case there's some questions for how
Thank you.
planning will be administering this.
Thank you. I think Councillor Pena has another question.
I'd like to hear from the director first,
Thank
and then
you.
I'll ask my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Varela.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair and Councillor Pena. That's an excellent question. It's the same one that the administration has. Basically, this amendment would simply, in a sense, tell us to do what we're already doing. And so I don't think, from my perspective, that it's necessary. I think what was happening here was in the process of us waiting for the state to start issuing the retail licenses, there was a lot of pressure out there in the community to find out what the processes were. And so as we were getting peppered with questions on what the process would be, I am willing to bet that the council was as well. And so it was just a matter of timing. Our process was up and implemented, I think, by the same day that this bill actually got introduced. And so perhaps that was what happened there. But from our perspective, no, the administration of the program and how to determine when an application is complete, and of course have those date type stamped, coincides exactly with what the sponsor of the bill was thinking. But we don't believe that the bill is necessary at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pena.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that was my question, because it seemed as though when Petra was stating that it was part of the process already, I didn't understand why we would need it. And then my other question would be, is that when it talks about like a marijuana retail location, does it mean selling marijuana, or could it be cannabis? Marijuana can mean like where they sell, pipes or whatever else that they sell. So is it just across the board? I mean, so it seems as though like if somebody has a marijuana retail shop, that next door they may sell supplies or whatever the case may be. Yeah, is that, it doesn't seem like it's clear in this legislation, and maybe leaving this legislation, leaving this alone and letting it be part of the rules process, that you could actually navigate through that as you're making the rules, because it seems as though there's not clarity on that either.
Mr. Varela.
And Madam Chair, thank you. And Councillor Pena, that is correct. We actually know that the rules can be changed probably quicker than changing an ordinance, particularly since we are getting into some of these administrative how-tos. And the state changes its rules quite frequently. That's how they're doing it, rather than trying to change the statute. So we have been kind of rolling along with their changes, but it would be much more, I think, timely for us to continue to have some of this just administered through a rulemaking process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Benton, would you like to move the amendment? Take a vote on the amendment.
I would, Madam Chair, but I would need to ask your thoughts on this. Because of the questions that have been raised, and also Director Varela's statement that this is unnecessary, I don't think we need to sit around beating on it to death here at Lux, but I think if we're not going to recommend a no pass, which is a separate, this is not the motion. I wondered if my co-sponsor, Chair Jones, would be willing to change the motion to move without recommendation to the full council to dispose of this.
Thank you, Councilor Benton, and I'm sure I will, but I think right now we need to take a vote on the move the amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That's fine. I'm out of order, but yeah, sure.
No, not at all.
I'm putting that out there because that's what I'm hearing.
I think let's move the amendment first, Councilor Benton. We're kind of free flowing tonight. I'll second that motion. Any comment? Then let's call the roll on the amendment.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Beebecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Jones.
Yes.
That passes on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you, councilors. Now we need to vote on the final bill, and I think we can probably, a few of us would like to comment on that. Councilor Benton, would you like to comment further?
Well, I respect the opinion of the director of the planning department on this, and I'm never been a fan of passing things that are just that might clog up the works in the future. I know Petra Morris has kind of shepherded this through, and maybe like to hear from her. But if we've got some questions out there as to the necessity of this, it would seem like we would want to have some discussions about that, and then allow it to go to full council. So that was my thinking on changing the motion from I believe we had a recommendation to do pass to a without recommendation.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments before I? If not, Councilor Benton, I believe that this is something that can't be done on the fly, and we need to have something written in an ordinance or legislation. I think this is far too important a process and a great adventure for the city of Albuquerque to try to get this correct. And I am uncomfortable not having those guidelines put in place somewhere.
Okay,
perhaps by the city council sending forward our ideas, we might be, it's not like we don't have time to do this. We might be able to come up with something that the administration and the city council feels better about and will work better for the users and the business people are going to be involved with this. So personally, I would like to see this go to full council without recommendation. And perhaps we can get some more comments and some more ideas from administration and other counselors before we either approve or don't approve this type of legislation. But I think this is a big thing for the city, that if we get it wrong, it's much more uncomfortable to try to fix it than if we try to fix it before we get it wrong. So that would be my suggestion on it, that we move forward without recommendation. Director Varela.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did want to just reiterate that there is a unparalleled track with this is a rulemaking process. The temporary emergency rule has been introduced, which reflects this process. There will be a hearing coming up on that, and then we will proceed to converting that to a regular rulemaking process. And so there is opportunity there, and our ears are open for input from the public and from the business community to do it through the rulemaking process. Just wanted to let you know, this isn't just simply a internal procedure that was set up by the planning department. It's going through a public process as well.
Thank you, Mr. Varela, and I would certainly hope that the city council be included in that public process.
Most definitely, yes.
That's,
yes.
I think, one of our major concerns. So right now, Councilor Benton, we have R6. How would you like to move that? As amended? Move it forward without recommendation?
Yes, I think that's the motion at this point, since you agree with that change, Madam Chair.
So that would be move forward to full council as amended without recommendation. Okay. All those in favor? Oops, I'm sorry. I don't get to call the roll. Sorry, I want to take control of this.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Beebecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Jones.
Yes.
That passes on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you, everyone. Some good comments and some good information out there this evening. Is there any other business? I see none. So being no further business, this committee, LUPS committee meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you all.